The bus was packed, passengers lost in their own worlds, some scrolling through their phones, others staring blankly out the window. But then, a sharp voice cut through the quiet hum of the engine. "You're so slow. I told you to sit down already." A young man snapped at his elderly mother, his tone dripping with frustration. People turned their heads. The woman, frail and tired, lowered her gaze, her hands trembling as she struggled to steady herself. Most passengers shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. But one man, a black veteran sitting near the front, wasn't about to let this slide. He watched for a moment, his expression unreadable, then slowly stood up. With a quiet but firm voice, he spoke, and what he said next would change everything, not just for the young man, but for everyone on that bus. The veteran's deep, steady voice cut through the tense silence. "That's no way to speak to your mother, son." His words weren't loud, but they carried weight, making the young man flinch slightly. The young man turned, his face tight with annoyance. "Mind your own business, old man," he muttered, crossing his arms. A few passengers gasped quietly, their eyes darting between them. The elderly woman shifted uncomfortably, her gaze fixed on the floor. The veteran didn't move, his eyes calm but firm. "I've seen a lot in my life," he said, "and I know disrespect when I see it." His tone wasn't angry, just steady, like someone who had nothing to prove but everything to teach. The young man hesitated. Something about the veteran's presence unsettled him. Who was this man? And why did it feel like he wasn't just talking about this moment, but something much bigger? The young man clenched his jaw, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His mother reached out, gently tugging at his sleeve, as if silently pleading for him to let it go. But there was something in the veteran's eyes, something steady, unshaken, that made it impossible to just brush him off. "Look, you don't know me," the young man said, his voice lower now, but still defensive. "You don't know what I've been through." The veteran nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't. But I do know that no struggle justifies treating your own mother like she's a burden." His words were measured, carrying the weight of experience. A woman sitting nearby glanced up from her phone, her brow furrowed in concern. An older man in the back let out a small sigh, as if he had seen something like this before. The entire bus seemed to hang in a quiet pause, waiting for what would happen next. The young man scoffed, shaking his head. "She doesn't understand," he muttered under his breath, but there was something else in his voice now. Less anger, more something unspoken. The veteran studied him for a moment. "Maybe she does," he said. "Maybe she understands more than you think." The young man's hands curled into fists on his lap, his jaw tightening as he stared at the floor. The veteran could see it, the weight of something buried deep, something heavier than just this moment. His mother shifted in her seat, her tired eyes filled with unspoken pain. I just want to help," she whispered. Her voice was small, almost lost in the hum of the moving bus, but it was enough to make the young man's shoulders stiffen. The veteran leaned slightly forward. "You think she doesn't understand," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Mothers understand more than we give them credit for, even when we push them away, even when we're too blind to see it." The young man let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, and what would you know about that?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion he was trying to hide. The veteran's gaze didn't waver. "I know because I made the same mistake once," he said, his tone heavy with meaning. The bus grew even quieter. Passengers exchanged glances, sensing that something deeper was unfolding. The young man swallowed hard, but he said nothing. The veteran's words had struck something inside him, something raw, something real. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. The bus rattled over a pothole, but no one seemed to notice. All eyes were on the veteran and the young man, the tension thick enough to silence even the usual hum of quiet conversations. The veteran exhaled slowly, his gaze distant, as if he were looking at something far beyond the walls of that bus. "I had a mother once," he said, his voice quieter now. "She was tough, but she loved me more than I ever deserved. And I wasted too many years being too proud, too angry to see it. The young man's brow furrowed, but he didn't speak. The veteran continued. By the time I realized what she meant to me, it was too late. I was deployed overseas, and one day I got a call. She was gone. His voice didn't shake, but there was something in his eyes, a deep, quiet pain. The young man's breath hitched. He looked away, his fingers gripping the edge of his seat. His mother turned toward him, watching closely, but saying nothing. Then, just when it seemed the moment couldn't get heavier, a woman near the front of the bus spoke. "I know that pain," she murmured. The passengers turned. She clutched a faded photograph in her hands, her fingers tracing the edges. "I lost my son before we could fix things, and every day I wish I had just one more chance." The young man's eyes darted between her and the veteran. The weight of their words pressed on him, forcing him to face something he had been running from. But would he listen before it was too late? The bus jolted again, but the young man barely noticed. His chest felt tight, like something was caving in. He glanced at his mother, really seeing her for the first time in what felt like years. The deep lines on her face, the tired look in her eyes. How long had she carried that? How long had he ignored it? His throat tightened. I didn't mean to." He stopped himself, swallowing the words. The veteran studied him for a moment, then nodded. "It's not too late," he said. "Not yet." The young man hesitated, then turned to his mother. She was already looking at him, her eyes soft but filled with years of unspoken love. His hands twitched in his lap. He wanted to say something, anything. But how do you fix years of hurt in a single moment? Then, before he could find the words, his mother reached out and took his hand. Just like that. No anger, no hesitation, just the quiet strength of a mother's love. The young man's face crumbled. He gripped her hand tightly, his fingers shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. The bus was silent, but the moment didn't need words. Even the passengers who had been strangers minutes ago felt the weight of it. The veteran nodded once, satisfied, and sat back in his seat. Then, just as the tension began to lift, the bus driver suddenly pulled over. The doors hissed open, and a transit officer stepped inside. "We got a report of a disturbance," he said, scanning the passengers. For a split second, no one spoke. Then, to everyone's shock, the veteran chuckled. "Guess I made a bigger impact than I thought." The officer frowned. "Sir, I need you to come with me." The young man's head snapped up. "Wait, what? You didn't do anything." The veteran just smiled. "Don't worry, kid. I've handled worse." He glanced at the young man one last time. "Take care of your mother." And just like that, he stepped off the bus, leaving everyone, including the young man, wondering if they had just met a stranger, or someone sent to change everything. The bus sat in stunned silence as the doors closed behind the veteran. The young man stared after him, his mind racing. Who was he, really? And why did it feel like he had just lost something important? His mother squeezed his hand gently, bringing him back to the moment. He turned to her, and for the first time in a long while, he saw more than just the woman who raised him. He saw her sacrifices, her patience, her quiet love through everything. "I'll do better," he murmured. She smiled, the kind that forgives without needing words. "I know." The bus rumbled back to life, moving forward. Around them, passengers returned to their own worlds, but something had shifted. The young man let out a breath, feeling lighter somehow. As they rode on, he couldn't shake the feeling that the veteran wasn't just a stranger. Maybe, just maybe, he was exactly who they needed that day.